What's up, everybody? This is the Booch, and welcome to episode 22 of the Boochcast reviews, Darkside of the Ring. And ladies and gentlemen, if you've seen the title already, you already know what the fuck's about to happen. Here's the thing. This is going to be an interesting show we got for you guys. And of course, I am being joined by AEW correspondent, singer-songwriter, the one and only Mr. Desmond Dagenhart.
Hey, fuckers.
And of course, I am being joined by this sarcastic asshole over here. He's been woken, he's been broken, and now he's just broke. Ladies and gentlemen, one and only, Mr. Zach Scott is here, the broke soulless ginger.
What's up, dude? It is a broke soulless ginger. Generally speaking, I'm not broke.
And you know
He's
what?
lying.
I don't know, man. I've been hearing stories. So, anyway.
Whoa, wait a minute. Stories?
Yeah.
What stories?
I don't know.
About him?
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's the other ginger. But anyway.
As told by Ginger.
Yeah. Oh, God. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I think let you know right off the bat, you know we're sarcastic motherfuckers, but also, we need a good laugh, because we know once we get started with this, there ain't going to be a whole lot of laughing. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this episode of Darkside of the Ring, we are about to cover In the Shadow of Grizzly Smith. And here's the thing. This is a story that has... If you really follow wrestling and you watch and you listen to podcasts and you really are deep in the business, you've heard inklings of these stories over the years. They've been told in bits and pieces. It's one of those stories where you're like, I've heard this story, I've heard this story. Is it true? Is it not true? Did people know? Did people not know what was going on? Like, this is the first time it is told, not only to the world, because Darkside of the Ring is one of those shows that's designed not just people in the wrestling business, but even people who aren't in the wrestling business to fully understand. So it reaches out to everybody. Not only that, it's also being told by all the members of the Smith family. And here's how crazy this episode is, ladies and gentlemen. At the start of this episode, they did something that, to my knowledge, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, I have not seen on any Darkside of the Ring episode thus far. They put a disclaimer at the beginning of this episode, which I've never seen before. Do you remember, Des, any disclaimers?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. This is the disclaimer you see at the beginning of this episode. Before anything else, before a word is even said, they say, the following episode features a discussion about incest and sexual abuse. Yeah. Viewer discretion is advised. So in the spirit of that, I'm going to take this opportunity right now to warn all of you watching right now. Because this episode contained incest and sexual abuse, that is going to be a topic discussed in this video. Everybody here has got a strong opinion about it in some way or another. Some of these you may agree with, some of these you may not, some of these, we don't know what the fuck's gonna happen. I just know we're gonna talk about this story, we're gonna get into this conversation, and if this is gonna be an uncomfortable topic for you, you might wanna skip this. I'm not doing the move along snowflake, because there's no snowflakes on this episode. This is just, if you're uncomfortable, go to next week's show. But I'm just letting you know, that's coming up in this episode. Why? Because it happened to them. So, it starts off with Jake the Snake Roberts is one of the most authentic personalities the wrestling world has ever seen. Behind his raw intensity lies a depth of personal trauma which has shaped his iconic in-ring persona. And of course, even though he was the only one to my knowledge that never held a title, he is, like, as far as stars go, the most recognized member of this entire family. Mm-hmm. And of course, we all know Jake's story. He was on, if you've watched Beyond the Mat, if you've seen the resurrection of Jake the Snake Roberts, the documentary, Jake had his battles with drugs, alcohol. He was able to get clean. He was the one wrestler no one thought would ever get clean and sober, and he did. And unknown to fans for years, wrestlers Sam Houston and Rockin' Robin are Jake the Snake's real-life brother and sister. And they each followed in the footsteps of their father, the wrestling giant Grizzly Smith, who is one of the biggest names in wrestling. He was also known for being a booker. He was known for, you know, his mind for the business, and to only a select group of people, the fucked up shit that he was involved in. And we're gonna get into all that in this episode, but very few people, like, people heard about it, but nobody really knew what was happening. Like, I remember Jim Cornette said on his podcast, because people were sending him messages, because Jim had worked close with Grizzly Smith in a few territories. They asked him, like, how did you guys not know about this? How did you guys not say anything? And he said, well, for the same reason people continue to work with Jeffrey Dahmer in his candy store. Nobody knew he was fucking eating people at the time. So yeah, we worked with Grizzly Smith because we didn't know, because we didn't see him touching little girls. They didn't see it. It wasn't knowledge to them. Because back in those days, you didn't know much about a wrestler's personal life. Because they very seldom brought their wives or their girlfriends or any significant others to the show. So that's why it was so easy for some wrestlers to cheat on their wives, because they never came on the road with them and nobody said shit. So like nobody saw, and when he did do inappropriate stuff, it was never where anybody could witness it or see it. For all you knew, it was just a little girl that got invited to the show. Nobody saw any inappropriate stuff. It all happened behind closed doors and got revealed later.
Yep.
So nobody really knew, and we'll get into more about that on this show. And they said he had so much control over his kids that he could pit them against each other, because he was the master of everything and he was the puppeteer, like very much like a master of manipulation. And scarred by traumatic childhoods, the Smith children followed self-destructive paths and each battled addictions that nearly destroyed their lives. And then Jake gave the most intense quote I've ever seen. He said, do you know how hard it is to put a smile on your face when you know what a piece of shit you really are? I don't know about you guys, but that shit hit home with me.
Yeah, true.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Des, how'd you feel when Jake said that?
Of all the things that were said in this particular video, I'd say that's probably one of the more mellow things that was said.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. Nobody should have to feel that.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, and then of course they talk about how Sam was in prison for 2 days. He tried to hang himself. His sister was scarred of the fact that their father was attracted to really young girls. Then they show a pic of a girl named Joanne, and at the time they talk more about Joanne later in the video, but the way they were advertising it, they made it seem like Grizzly had killed her and got rid of the body. So it was very, now obviously that we found out later that it was something different, but the way they foreshadowed that picture and how little I knew of it, I'm like, are they gonna tell me I thought Grizzly killed and dumped a body somewhere, but you couldn't tell because the scene happened so fast, the reenactment. Like it just blew right by you. So I will say to the Darkside of the Ring people, kudos on that, because that's how you get people to stay tuned. Like, whoa, like I gotta follow this story and see at least what happened here. So I will say they did a good job of presenting this, and that's one of the few compliments I can give. And then decades later, the Smith family faced their haunted past in order to survive beyond the ring. And then Jake says, if you want to feel pain, you have to go to the top and get knocked back down to the bottom. And that's when you feel real pain. And that's usually often the case with like people with addictions always say, is that before they can really clean themselves up, they have to hit bottom to realize, I have a problem, I need to get help. Now, there are rare occasions when people find that out beforehand, but most of them, they gotta hit bottom, and Jake definitely hit bottom. All of them did in some capacity. And they said basically about their childhood, there was no relationship. There was no pat each other on the back, no I believe in you shit. They said you would have never believed we were brothers and sisters, because they just didn't have that kind of relationship or vibe. And he said, the kids were raised at a distance and were never close with each other, which was the most interesting thing about this. Like the fact that they're related yet had no close relation of any kind. And even despite the fact that even in some cases they were living together in the same house and still didn't have that. That's gotta be scary.
Well, they did say that, you know, 2 of them were closer than the rest of them, and that was because they spent so much time living together. But the problem was they were all separated at a young age. Some of them went to the aunt, some of them went to the sister, some of them went to the... They all went to different... And when Grizzly and his first wife divorced, some went with the wife, and a couple of them stayed with him. It was very easy to keep them separate because they were in so many different households. Which, that kind of sort of touches home with me. I've got 8 little sisters. I've only ever lived with one of them consistently throughout my entire life. 2 of my sisters were adopted out to another family, and we were under the impression it was going to be an open adoption. But we were told that later on, after it was finalized, we were told that if those girls ever learned who we really were, then we'd never see them again.
Why do they do that?
Because they wanted to raise the girls as their own kids, without outside influence.
That's insane.
That's stupid.
When you think you know a friend, then the other 4 were adopted out to another family. And, we had a lot more contact with them, but it was still kind of at a distance. It's like they were old enough when it happened, they were old enough to understand who we were, so there was no really taking that away. But the 2 youngest were adopted to a different family, and we were not allowed to tell them who we were.
Damn. Did you ever get to see them again?
Yes, actually. I had a pretty emotional situation. We've had a couple of big family reunions. They now know who we are. It's a different situation. I had a situation where I almost came in a temporary guardianship of the 2 youngest this past year.
Yeah, I think I remember. I might have remembered bits and pieces of hearing that when I was at your house.
Yeah, I was not exactly in a place to talk about it, and I'm still not. I'm very upset about it.
Sure. You can share as much as you want.
Oh yeah, it's basically they were in a DFACS case, and I was on a very short list of people who were approved approved by their adopted father as someone possibly take them during this DFACS case. Keep in mind, the DFACS case was against the father, and I'm saying, why does he fucking have a choice in the matter? Nonetheless, I was one of the few people approved, which it's good enough. That was fine.
Yeah,
But one of the people that he approved was someone who very much I did not. The girls didn't like him. The girls didn't trust him. It was a 20-something, maybe low 30s, single man living alone, taking in 2 teenage girls. Yeah, I'm like, I don't feel comfortable with that, and DFACS should have seen a problem with that. They had a blood relative who was ready to go through drug tests and everything, and my job drug tests, so I have to stay clean.
Oh yeah.
The point of the matter being, I came from a family that was kind of separated in the same way, so this really hit home for me, right off the bat, just the separation.
Yeah. Well, I hope everything's is everything still with the teenage girls? Everything okay?
Well, they're back with the adoptive dad at the moment.
Okay.
I don't think the case is fully closed, but it's whittled down.
Okay.
I don't agree with them being back with him. I firmly believe that the only reason that he wants to keep, the only reason that he's keeping custody of them right now is because he wants the check that you get when you adopt kids.
And in most cases, when people adopt, that does play a major factor in them wanting to keep the kids.
I mean, don't get me wrong.
Which is crazy.
Don't get me wrong. That is a great incentive to help get kids out of the system. So I'm not against them getting a check.
Yeah.
But there needs to be more in-depth stuff going with it. And I firmly believe that if a blood relative wants to take them, they should be able to get them.
Yeah. If there's nothing wrong with them, they're qualified, and
I've got a clean background check.
You totally do. I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying in general, you want to make sure there's no skeletons in their closet either before you give it to them.
Absolutely.
And totally you're qualified. Since the formation of professional wrestling as an organized sport, it's very much been a family business with a lot of participants. So it's no stranger that the Smith family would have a wrestling family, because of course most people know there's the Hart family in Calgary. All 65 of them. And
more.
I'm just saying, you got the Hart family in Calgary. They're a big known wrestling family. And of course, if you've listened to the Darkside of the Ring episodes we've done, you know about the Von Erichs in Texas.
Yep.
I know Zach was a big fan of the review we did with
I like that one in particular.
Yes. The Von Erichs was a big one. I know I wanted Des and Elvis with me on it, but our schedules were out of whack, so I had to take care of that. But anytime you want to do, if you ever watch the Von Erichs and you want to do your own video, by all means, you're welcome to do so, and I'll put that up there. But so there's the Von Erichs in Texas, and of course there's the Guerrero family.
Oh yeah.
You know, Eddie, Chavo, Hector, you know, even Vicky that's managing now, and I think one of them has a daughter that's in the business. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. I think it's like Saul Guerrero or something. It's Saul something.
And then Dominique Mysterio.
I keep waiting for that, by the way. I always said if Dominic ever turns heel, like betrays Ray.
Just go on by the name Guerrero.
Yes. I'd say that's why I turned on my dad.
You're not my puppy.
Yes, I want to embrace the Guerrero name. That'd be great if he ever turned heel. But if you're not going to turn him heel, don't give him the Guerrero.
And honestly, that would be a good way for Ray to, when he was ready to retire, have Dominic go heel on him, have a WrestleMania build-up, send Ray out, and build Dominic up.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe WrestleMania 38. And of course, we have, you know, the McMahon family. You know, they're you know, Vince, Shane, Stephanie, Linda, and so on. There's just so many wrestling families that have been involved. And, you know, you could trust family members with the business secrets and the secrets in the ring because they were blood relatives. That's why a lot of people, when people would become promoters, they would mostly bring their family in either to wrestle or at least work behind the scenes in some capacity. Because back then, like I said, you protected shit. You didn't let people know what was going on. You could trust them with that because not only were they blood relatives, but they have a vested interest in that business doing well because it's their livelihood as well. That's how that's how that man is making money to put food on the table for you. So you wanted that business to succeed just as badly because they all make money. So that was one of the big things. And the Smith family is on that list, but they're the only people in the industry knew that they were related. The audience, we didn't have a clue. You had no idea. When you saw Sam Houston, when you saw Rockin' Robin, when you saw Jake the Snake.
Look, I'm gonna be honest with you. When he said, "Oh, we're gonna do the Smith family," I'm like, "Oh, okay." My mind went to Davey Boy.
Exactly. Oh, exactly. Like and then you're looking at the names and you're like, wait, what? And some of these people I had forgotten. Some of them I'd forgotten about Rockin' Robin. And Sam Houston, I was like, that name sounded familiar, but I was like, holy shit, they're all related? Because I knew Jake had a dad in the business, because Jake told stories constantly. He, like I said, if you've been on Joe Rogan's podcast, you know most of this stuff, because Jake opened up about it on Joe Rogan's podcast. So you know a little bit about this. But to people who don't listen to Joe Rogan, this is new information. So, and of course, the Grizzly, and when he told the story about Grizzly and everything else, and we're going to get into that, it's intense. So, according to Jim Cornette, Sam Houston was the best wrestler in the family. He said because he was the best athlete, everybody. He considered Sam Houston to be the best.
He said very clearly in ring he was the best talent.
Yes. Now, granted, Jake was a bigger star, but Sam was a better wrestler.
No, I think, let's be honest here, most of us would probably agree Jake was the best on mic, period.
Oh, yes.
Hands down. It doesn't matter who's better in ring. Jake had that shit down.
Yes, and Jim Cornette admits about that. Now, his real name is Michael Smith. That's Sam Houston's real name. So that's how so he never really went by Smith in the ring. And Jake is the oldest in the family, and they have another brother named Richard who was second born. Sam was the third, and Rockin' Robin is the youngest in the family. And according to Sam, Robin is one of the best women's world champions in history. And it even says WWF ladies champion. It didn't even say women, it said ladies back then. That's the thing. You think the women's division is not, no one gives a shit now? Look at back then. They called them ladies champion. Wasn't even women. Wasn't even divas. Ladies. So
you have to realize
think about that.
You have to realize back then lady was considered a very respectful term.
Really?
You were ladies and gentlemen. Lady was the term. You were lord and lady. I mean,
that's good. No, I didn't think about that. That is true. I didn't think about that.
Lady has only been digressed here more recently.
Okay.
So yeah, back in the 70s, 80s, lady was actually a term of respect for women.
So
divas was the that was the
yeah. So that's a good point. So, and then she had said the idea for her name was lazy. Because she said someone asked her who she wanted to be announced as in her first match. And she just blurted out, Rockin' Robin. That's it. That was how she got her name. There was no special story. There was no nickname. She just blurted out, Rockin' Robin? All right, you're Rockin' Robin.
And she's like, I'd like to have tried out Rotten Robin at some point. That would be a great heel turn right there. Just
That's the thing. If she turned, and I don't remember if Rockin' Robin was ever heel, but if she was, she could have did that quick switch just to make it interesting, or give her some kind of new name. Because it's not the first time people who turn heel have switched their names a little bit. Like Stevie Richards was Steven Richards. Hulk Hogan was Hollywood Hogan. Godfather was the Good Father when he joined the Right Censor. So they make slight little name changes to make it work. And now Jake's nickname as a kid was Buster, which I would have never guessed that in a billion years.
he was a puppy dog.
Here, boy. Come on, Buster. And his real name was Aurelian Smith Jr.
That's a name.
Yeah, that's a what? And he said he loved the stardom and the spotlight being on him. That's what people said. When he walks in the room, he has the attitude of all eyes on me. And anytime Jake Roberts made an entrance to the ring, you could tell that's true. Like just walking to the ring, just everything else. And Richard Neighbors, who was their second born, is the only member of the family to not get into the wrestling business. And they asked him why, the reason he didn't want to get in, and the reason was he didn't want to travel like that.
That's a legitimate reason. I mean, especially back then, you didn't do 1 or 2 shows a week. You worked every night, and you ran a circuit. It's like you do a show in one city, then next night you'd be in another nearby city, and you ran a circuit going in a circle the whole way through, and you didn't stop. So, I mean, that's a legitimate reason, especially back then. It's not like today when they can make a lot of money from one company working a couple of nights a week.
Yeah. And it wasn't until like the last couple years that they really started giving wrestlers more days off. Like, it used to be like, even during the Attitude Era, 300, 200 plus days a year you were on the road.
I mean, you were still on the road. I mean, let's be honest, even when you're working a few nights a week, you're still on the road.
Yeah.
But back then, you were in the ring every night. Now it's like, oh, I have an autograph signing this night. I have a radio show this day. I have an interview. and then about 1 or 2 nights a week you're wrestling.
Yeah.
It's a big difference.
Yeah. It's more media stuff than anything. That's why that's another key element to being in wrestling today, is being able to handle all that. Like knowing that you're gonna walk in a room and a crowd of people are gonna be lined up outside the building to get an autograph or something. And there are some guys who can handle that, and there are some wrestlers who just can't.
I mean, Randy Orton's not a bad person. You get him one-on-one, but he is not a crowd-friendly person.
No.
I mean, he'll openly admit it. He's not good in crowds. I mean,
and yeah, and some people just aren't. Like, even Brock Lesnar said he doesn't really like people that much. Like, he shuts the gate when he goes back home to Minnesota to the farm. He shuts the gate. You don't want to talk to nobody, but he'll get in a ring and do what he's got to do, or talk in the back with whoever he's got to talk to. But some people just aren't sociable people. It's not necessarily they hate everybody. It's just I'm just not that kind of guy. And so of course, Jake Roberts as a wrestler, we were talking about him before. He had strengths and weaknesses. Jake was never a high-level amateur athlete, and he didn't have a ridiculous physique. But he understood the mental aspect of pro wrestling, the psychology of it. I want to say that one more time. The psychology of it. Psychology. I wish we had more of it. But he learned it by growing up with a father who was in wrestling and learning how to think of it, as well as having the verbal ability. And once he developed his character, he made you believe that he really was a snake in the grass. And there was probably some truth to it. But that's the thing that I loved about this, was that people understood that was the secret to Jake's success, was the psychology. And it's the thing I love to preach time and time again, because when you see somebody that's like 40, 50, 60 years old, and they're coming back for a match, and you're thinking to yourself, why is this guy getting booked for a match? Because he knows psychology and can work the crowd despite being able to be decrepit. So the thing about Jake was he was in his dad's shadow and spent a lot of time with him learning the business. So that's probably the one positive Jake would ever say about his dad, was that he did teach him the business. However, in the beginning, his dad didn't want him in the business at all and got him fired from a couple of places by asking the promoters to fire him. Like, that's the level of connection Grizzly Smith had. Like, the dude practically owned the wrestling business during that time, at least in Texas. Like, where he's calling to get his own son fired because he doesn't want him in the business. Like, I've seen dads not want their kids in the business, but never to that extreme. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was goddamn ridiculous. And then he says that he got humiliated and got stretched in matches, as well as getting tore up to the point where he was crawling back to the locker room. And this right here is a key thing you want to look at. Because there's two ways to look at this. One, usually when you're starting out in the business, that's what happens. You're getting stretched, you're getting tossed around, you're getting the treatment. But most people didn't get it as bad as Jake did. And the reason he got it so horribly was because of Grizzly Smith's behavior. The way he, you know, the whole thing with the little girls and the sexual abuse and everything, because they knew Grizzly Smith had power. He had the power to hire and the power to fire. So while they didn't see anything, most people kind of knew what the fuck he was doing. It's one of those things where we can't hit him, so they took the anger out on Jake. So Jake's basically getting the shit beat out of him week after week in the ring because of his dad's behavior. And that, I think, is the worst thing. Like, look, if you want to break somebody into the business and do it the old school way, I'm all for it. And I'm all for it because they do that to make you, A, respect it, and B, how bad you really want to do this. It was a test. But the difference is, once you pass the test and they welcomed you, that shit stopped. With Jake, it went way longer and it was way worse because of who his dad was. And it's like, we can't touch him, but we can beat the shit out of him. So they beat the shit out of Jake. And after he crawls back to the locker room, his father looked at him and said, "You're gutless, I'm ashamed of you, and you'll never amount to anything." And that was the motivation for him to get into the business, to become successful and shove it up his father's ass. He wanted to hear his father say, "I'm proud of you, son. I'm really proud of you." But he never told him that. However, he would tell it to all the other wrestlers. That's a mind fucking a half right there.
I agree.
You know that I lived with my dad for the first half of my life.
Yeah.
I spent summers with my mom, but my dad was my primary guardian.
Yeah.
When I was 17, I moved in with my mom. My dad taught me a lot of things. He taught me a love of a lot of different kinds of music. Listened to a lot of rock, a lot of country, a little bit of pop, a little bit of R&B. So I learned a lot of love for music from him. I learned what it was like. I learned how to put, how to work for shit, because my dad always put work first, always. Something that always fucked with me though, and I had anger issues for a long time. And I mean, I get worked up now, but I had real anger issues for a long time. And something that I didn't figure out until much later was they stemmed from the fact that my dad, while he would teach me things, never showed any appreciation for what I learned, never showed me that he was proud of me for anything. Like the one time, I brought home straight A's one time in high school. I was always an honor roll student. I brought A's and B's all the time. I was good in school. Which for an ADHD motherfucker like me, that was a fucking accomplishment.
Yeah.
But I brought home straight A's one time. My dad looked at me and I kid you not, said, "You cheat?"
What?
Accused me of having somebody go in and change my grades.
What the fuck?
17 years, I'd never been told by a father figure that that they were proud of me. The man my mom married later on in life, my stepfather, the man who tattoo on my chest.
Yeah.
Stephen Beecham was the first man to ever tell me he was proud of me. He was the man who taught me how to talk to people. Taught me how to let stuff go, taught me how to trust, taught me how to love a family. My dad was there for me financially, took care of me, fulfilled his obligation. Steve was the man who taught me all that stuff, and the fact that it didn't happen until I was 17 years old really fucked with me. Yeah. So I understand exactly where Jake's coming from with this. How bad that can really fuck you up. And I don't think my dad ever realized what he was doing. My dad, I firmly believe my dad did the best that he could. I'm not attacking him. But my dad did not know how to love a family, and, you know, as somebody who didn't get that as a kid, I 100% understand how Jake felt in that moment.
Yeah. But then, of course, after Jake tells that story, the key thing they talk about here is, of course, they put the centerfold back on Grizzly Smith and his deal. So Grizzly Smith got involved in the wrestling business while he was working in an oil field. And he met someone that knew about wrestling and saw how big he was and said, "You'd probably be good." Which, again, back then, that's how they looked at wrestlers. If you had the look, they would teach you everything else. Like, because back then, they wanted wrestlers to look larger than life. Like, look like somebody that didn't look like the average person. That you saw them, you looked at them and went, "Oh my God, I don't ever want to fight this guy." Because regardless of how you might feel about bigger wrestlers today, you know deep down you ain't picking a fight with those guys. You saw Grizzly Smith, you're not fighting him. You see Brock Lesnar, you ain't fighting him. Goldberg, you ain't fighting him. John Cena, you ain't fighting him. Hogan, you sure as hell wasn't fighting him. Like, guys you just looked at and went, "That's scary." Ultimate Warrior, you weren't fighting him. Like, that's just crazy stuff like that. So he was, like you said, he was so big of a guy, people lined up and would pay like 25 or 50 cents. Again, this is like way back in the day when that would be like someone paying like $1 or $5 today. So back then, 25, 50 cents was a big deal, to punch him in the chest to see if he would double over. And if you doubled over, you kept your money. He made more money an hour doing that than he did in a week working in the oil field. Like, he made most of his money just being like, "You know what? Here's 50 cents. Try to knock me down." Boom. Nobody could do it. And they were legit, like, everything they had into that gut. And he's like, he's like, "I'm not even going to hit you back. I'll just give you your money." The only way he would hit you back is if after that shot to the gut, you try to hit him again. Then he's gonna knock your teeth out. You get one, and that's it. So he was fair like that. And then he was 7 foot tall, 350 pounds. He had long red hair and a big beard. He looked like he just walked right out of the woods. Which explains why he was called, why they like calling him Grizzly, because he looked like a freaking ginger grizzly bear. And, you know, he wore a pair of blue jeans and a rope, like a big satch cord, as a belt, because he couldn't hold his pants up. And if he could get a hold of someone and wrap his arms around them, then that was it. That's why the bear hug was his finisher, because he had such big arms and he could just choke somebody to death. And back then, a bear hug or something like that could be used as a finisher, because back then they were using.
It could be today if sold right
and done by the right person.
Oh yeah, you get the right, and like you get another motherfucking Braun Strowman could have done a bear hug and people would have bought it.
Yeah. And especially if you can pick the person up and ragdoll him. Mm-hmm. That's what Andre used to do before his back got messed up.
Even a face where you kind of go up under the arms and lift them over your shoulder and boom, boom, that's it.
Like back then, like moves like that were finishers because you didn't see them often. And then, you know, when you did, it was always with a purpose. Like if somebody had like a knockout punch as a finish, the way you protected it was you never threw it unless it's the finish. And you only threw it if it was the finish and you were going over. Mm-hmm. If I'm not going over, I ain't throwing the punch. Otherwise,
I might let you dodge the punch.
You'll dodge it. Worst case scenario, you dodge it. Something believable has to happen for you to break out of that. Like that's why usually in a bear hug, the counter they do is they rake the guy's eyes because it's an easy way to get out of that move, and it's believable. So because if somebody legitimately rakes your freaking eyes, you're gonna go, "Oh, my eyes," and drop the guy. So it made perfect sense to do that. And Sam Houston saw him as Superman when he was a kid. Mm-hmm. Like Sam Houston was the one kid, other than maybe Richard, that, you know, saw Grizzly Smith as Superman, whereas Jake and Rocket Robin, not so much. So, but Sam Houston loved him, and Grizzly would say about his own dad that his dad would give him a whooping when you lied to him. He gave you a whooping when you thought you needed it. He gave you a whooping for making a mistake. Suffice it to say, Grizzly Smith got slapped around a lot. And just to be clear,
We're not excusing anything he's done.
exactly. But I will say this: often when I've seen like videos or documentaries and stuff about people who have been abusers or molesters, things like that, that's usually been a common reason for how they went that route.
Right. Keep in mind, I'm a firm believer that a spanking here or there is all right.
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue that I've had with spankings is people who use that as the first step.
Yes.
There's a big difference between spanking a kid when they absolutely need it and spanking them for everything they do wrong.
Yeah. I think that in some way, shape, or form, and again, I want to put another disclaimer here. None of us are down talking our dads in this video. At least I'm not.
I have personal issues with my dad, but my dad truly did his best.
Exactly. So we're not saying our dads were terrible. We're just saying there was good, there was bad. And then you can say that about any kid.
You say that about anybody.
Anybody, exactly. There was good, there was some bad. But I'm saying that most dads, that was the go-to discipline. Some of them did it when it wasn't warranted.
Right.
You know, there's a time and a place. Like, trust me, there are times I've gotten whippings and I deserved it. There's times where I got them and I didn't.
There's times I did shit that my dad didn't even know about, and I didn't go home because because as soon as he found out, it was coming.
Yeah, you're that person where if you're in jail, you got that one phone call, you ain't calling home. And of course, you know, Jake says his father was a mean man who would torture them psychologically. He would stay in character at home. Jake cried himself to sleep thinking the opponents in the ring would try to kill him. That's fucked up.
Yeah, there's a thing with K-Fob, and actually Gator has called me about this because Gator's played a heel a lot of his career. And he called me about a situation where he made a kid cry, and his mom came at him backstage and had a lot of attitude, and shit was going on, and I'm sitting here like, and he said, because at that point, his girlfriend had a young daughter, and he's trying to figure out the parenting thing, and he's trying to figure out how far in the wrong he was for acting the way he did. And I said, well, here's the thing. Me as a parent, as a big wrestling fan, you made my kid cry. Part of me wants to say, that's fucked up, but part of me is also like, you're the bad guy. You're not supposed to be nice. Now, being a big wrestling fan and knowing the business, I can look at my kid and say, look, you know how we talked about some of these guys are good guys and bad guys, and they play stories and they're playing characters. You understand that he's not really a bad guy. He has to act this way because it's part of the show. And my kid might be a little sniffled and, you know, still a little upset. But I would walk up to if I would had the opportunity to walk up to the wrestlers and say, hey, look, big fan of your work. We had a little bit of an issue. Made my kid cry. Now I've explained to him the business. He understands it's part of the show, but I just kind of want to make sure you, could you do me the favor of, you know, shaking his hand, telling him that, you know, as part of the show, letting him know that I'm not being a liar. And to me, that's, you know, a respectful way to talk to somebody. But, and Gator said, you know, in that particular instance, if somebody come up to him, then he'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. But if you are being the bad guy and you're being a dick just to be a dick, you know, outside of the ring, you're being a dick just to be a dick, especially to your own goddamn family, that's fucked up. You don't part of the wrestling business, you know, when you have kids, is you're letting them know, hey, yeah, we're, you know, it's a show. Daddy's okay. Yeah, I know, I'm a little busted up. It's okay, they check me out, we're good.
You don't stay in character at home.
No.
You don't. You got to turn it off somewhere.
I don't care what you do for a living, you leave that shit at the door.
Yeah. So if you didn't think this guy was fucked up before, here's proof right here. And then by the end of the 70s, Grizzly Smith retired from the ring, and he transitions into being a manager behind the scenes. But he used his power and influence for something much more sinister. And now here's where we're getting into this part here. Basically, and Jim Cornette says while they were in the locker room, he would hear jokes about Grizzly molesting little girls and stuff. Like, hey, is he going to be teaching them Bible verses and shit? Like, they would be cracking these jokes in the locker room. But he said, at the time, I had no idea if it was true or not. I did not know, because wrestlers love to tell stories. Mm-hmm. They love to spread rumors. Mm-hmm. We hear that all the time, how sometimes wrestling stories, there are some that get heard and you find out later that wasn't true at all. And then you find out, oh yeah, that was true. No, that's not true. That was true. No, that's not true. So you don't know. Nobody truly knew.
What we do know is Sean absolutely knew about the screw job.
Yes. We found that out. We did find that out, that they knew about it. They denied it left and right, and Brett may not have believed him, but wasn't ready to fucking kill him at the time. Brett didn't have enough evidence to want to kill him, but...
And by the time he didn't have the evidence, it just didn't matter anymore.
Exactly, and you can listen to the Montreal Screwjob episode if you want to know more about that. We're not going to jump into that. Please listen to that.
I just have to make references to shit. It's what I do.
No, I know. I just don't want to go too deep into it. Go watch that with us and John. So, and Baby Doll comes in here and she says, everybody knew Grizzly. Everybody had good things to say about him, and they wanted to do road shows with him because they wanted to pick his brain about how they could make themselves better and how do they make more money. Because at the time, Grizzly knew how to do that. Mm-hmm. So obviously, if you want to be successful in the business, you want to pick the brains of the big stars. That's the big advantage to if someone's running an indie show and you bring in a legend. You want to, if you're a young guy in the business, you want to pick that legend's brain somehow.
And then you realize, yeah, Goldberg doesn't know shit. This really is just a big guy.
This is never gonna end.
No, it's not.
You are never gonna let this die, man.
It's a good bit.
No, it is. It is.
It's a good bit.
At this point, it might as well be. So, and then she said, so Baby Doll becomes part of this family because she married Sam Houston. So she and Sam Houston, which I didn't even know that. I knew very little about Baby Doll. I've heard different stories about her, but this is the first time I ever really got to know Baby Doll. Because I know she used to manage Dusty Rhodes at one point. That was my extent of my Baby Doll knowledge. So she gets to the family by marrying Sam Houston. She said during those road trips they would pick up teenage girls and they would ride with them for 3 to 4 days. So my first thought was, okay,
That wasn't a clue.
yes, what the fuck? How does that? And because here's the thing. I'm pausing and taking notes and writing stuff down. So as I'm pausing, I'm thinking, where the fuck were the parents in all this? Then I hit play, and I find out the parents are waving in the front yard. Bye, see you later. What? 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 On what fucking planet? Like at this point, do we really want to be mad at Grizzly, or are we more pissed at the parents? Like who?
Yes.
Who gets the anger?
I'm here. Yes, both.
Both. Okay. Like, 'cause I'm like, what the fuck? How do you? I don't know.
The only thing I can think is maybe they saw the woman in the car and they're sitting there thinking, oh, they'll be okay.
Yeah, because he's probably dating her, so this will be okay. And because I'm just thinking like, these girls are like teenagers. Mm-hmm. Most parents won't let their teenage girls get in the car with a teenage boy. Think about that.
As a former teenage boy, they were probably in a good room.
Oh, no. Oh. Every dad thought, this guy's trying to screw my girl. Your suspicions are correct, sir.
And you know why? You know why every dad thinks that? Because he was that boy at one point.
We all were. So we're trying to put ourselves on a pedestal.
Even if we're being respectful about it.
Yes,
that's the goal. That's the end game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the difference is, even if the guy's saying yes sir, no sir, and is polite, he's still trying to get to that point. But even if he is a genuine good person, he had good intentions. But that's still the end game for every guy, regardless. The only difference is the nice guy is probably going to call your daughter the next day. That's the difference. The nice guy is going to call the next day or 3 days, because was supposed to wait 3 days because of Jesus. But my point is, by the way, if you don't know where that's from, you need help. So I'm like, what the fuck? It's like, so you would with a teenage boy, but you're gonna let your teenage girl get in a car with a grown man. A grown man comes to my door and says, "Oh yeah, I'll take your daughter on the road for 3 to 4 days." I'm like, you can get the fuck off my property, because one of two things is going to happen. Either I'm going to the show with you guys, or I'm going to blow your motherfucking brains out so you can see that what you're thinking is some bullshit. How about that? And at that point, I'm going to be like, well, you were probably the wrong person to ask. And then get in the car and fucking drive off. Like, what? That mind boggled me. Either he's a master manipulation or those parents don't love their kids. What the fuck? I mean, that wouldn't even happen today.
I mean, in all fairness, in the 90s, people were letting their kids go to Michael Jackson's house, so.
Yeah.
And look, I am in no way saying that he did or did not do anything wrong with those kids. He is a weird motherfucker, and the kids were there. Whether or not anything happened beyond that is allegations.
So, Jake endures a traumatic childhood, which would be a source of torment for the rest of his life. Jake didn't care about anybody. Aurelian Jr. was a scared child. Jake put him away a long time ago because it hurts too much to have him around. Jake's okay as long as you got him handcuffed. His mom was 13 when she was born, and he told this story on Joe Rogan's podcast. The reason he was born when his mom was 13, because Grizzly Smith was dating this woman, and while he was dating the woman, unbeknownst to the woman, I think unbeknownst to the woman, I could be wrong about that, but I'm saying unbeknownst, because I'm assuming she didn't know, he was molesting and raped her 13-year-old daughter. The daughter got pregnant, and Jake the Snake Roberts was born. Because he said his mom was 13 when she was born, and his father raped her because he was a disgusting pedophile. And when she was 17, Grizzly divorced her and went on the road, and the kids were all left behind. But yeah, that's Jake Roberts' story. Grizzly Smith raped the daughter of a woman he was dating, and Jake Roberts is born. That's gotta fuck with your head. I don't care who you are. That's gotta fuck with your head.
It's one of those deals where there is no... I mean, honestly, when Jake was born, it should have been an automatic this man was arrested, because that's all the proof they fucking needed. That's fucking...
Yeah.
That right there. You don't need any more evidence. There is a child with her DNA and his DNA. She is underage, therefore... fucking pedophile. Lock his ass up. That's it. And honestly, the only reason I'm saying lock the motherfucker ass up is because for some reason in this country we don't put down pedophiles.
Yeah, that's the thing I never understood either. Because this is the thing. And again, I'm not. But here's my issue with the whole thing: is that you get charged with it, you go to jail, they let you out of jail. But then when they let you out of jail, they put you on a list. They put signs in your yard. They make you knock on doors to tell people that you are registered in this area. And I'm like, okay, now, I'm not saying that pedophiles should have rights. But what I am going to say is this. If you're that paranoid that they're going to do it again, why are you letting them out of jail in the first place?
That's how the court system works.
But that's ridiculous.
I'm just going to...
like,
my thing is, when a dog bites a kid and it scars them for life, you put the dog down.
Well, we can't when a pedophile molests a kid, we don't put them down.
Exactly. Here's the thing. I would be all for that. Yeah. I am all for that.
Put the motherfucker down.
Exactly. But I just say because here's the thing. The whole purpose of putting someone in jail and letting them out of jail is that you believe while that person was in jail, they learned their lesson. They rehabilitate themselves. Not always true. I'm just saying that's the theory.
Yeah.
Is that they learned their lesson. They rehabilitate themselves. They realize, I did something wrong. I did something terrible. I should not have done that. I don't ever want to come back to this place. And then they get out and they are given their second chance to be a productive member of society. You are rolling the dice assuming this man is never going to kill again. This man's never going to rob again. This man's never going to rape again. This man's never going to molest again. So if you think he's going to do it again, don't let the motherfucker out, because the register shit, that doesn't do anything. Because first of all, here's another thing you're going to do. Because I guarantee you this. If they find out this person is living in their neighborhood, you're going to cause chaos. Because they're going to try to kill this guy. They're going to burn his house down. They're going to try to kill him. And listen to the thing, I'm not saying the man don't deserve to die, because he does, but are you trying to create chaos in a neighborhood? Put the motherfucker down or keep him in jail for life. Pick one.
I'm a firm believer, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate on this because there's a lot of really strong opinions on the death penalty. I'm against life in prison. Period. If you're going to put someone in prison and that you know they're in for life, put them down.
Yeah.
Why? Because there's no reason for us to continue to pay for the rest of this motherfucker's life when $20 worth of poison puts him down.
Unless it's like life with possibility of parole, then maybe.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you got life, but a maximum of life. If you get like 10 to life or something like that, and you're a model fucking prisoner. You do your 10 years, and you're able to be freed. Okay, whatever. Yeah, you're a model prisoner. You go through, you do the college stuff. You get it set up to where when you come out, you got a life going on.
Yeah.
I can let it go. But if you're going to be in prison for life, and that's it,
Like no parole, no nothing.
end the life.
Exactly. Weird is that this was during a time period, though, where even though, yes, rape was illegal and stuff, you could marry somebody at a young age and somehow nobody cared. It wasn't as, like, hectic as it is today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hell, Jerry Lee Lewis had a 13-year-old wife. So that, he not only did he not go to jail, the worst thing that happened to him was he couldn't tour for a while. And he was banned from England. That's the worst thing that happened to him. But eventually, his career got back on track. But so that's another thing you got to take into account too. I think it was the fact that he married her was what got him out of trouble. Because there was a whole thing about, if you get somebody pregnant, you marry them. It was like that was another traditional thing. After the kids get left behind, as we mentioned before, they got separated. They got passed around, which I thought was a poor choice of words. But
Yeah, after everything that was said.
yeah, everything was saying, the kids got passed around. I'm like, Jake, I get what you're trying to say. Very poor choice of words. But anyway, Richard went to Grizzly's sister and her husband because they couldn't have kids. Their sister Jolynn, who was molested by their dad, went everywhere. So she was bouncing around from foster home to foster home. The mom didn't know about this. And Jake said he had a wonderful mother. So he never, even though his mom was wonderful despite everything that went down, she was still a good mom to him. But Jake ended up living with his grandmother until she passes away when he's 11 years old. And then he is sent to live with his father and his new wife, Marcia. And then, just when you thought it couldn't get crazier, it gets crazier. Because Marcia molested Jake.
They never had kids.
Whoa. Like Jake, and then Jake went to tell his father, and while he's in the middle of trying to tell her, Marcia comes in, basically sends him to her room and says, "I'll deal with you later." She denies the whole thing, and then beat Jake in his room, goes in his room and beats the shit out of Jake with a clothes hanger and a fly swatter.
Actually, he never says she denied it. He says she smoothed it over.
Oh.
Yeah, he's right.
And the reason, because he later said that he believes that the father, he now believes that his father knew about it the whole time because he was doing the same thing to his sisters.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah, no. He never claimed that she denied it.
Okay, that's on me. That's on me. But the thing is, whatever she did, she smoothed it over. And that's what happened there. And then Rockin' Robin says her goal in this documentary is not to destroy the legacy of her father. He said he was a great wrestler, and to some he was a hero, but to her he was a monster.
It's about separating the man from the man from the persona.
Yeah, which I've already mentioned before how hard that shit is.
Oh man, I mean, look, and I'm sorry,
As far as I'm concerned, fucking Grizzly Smith should be scrubbed from the record books.
Yeah, he pretty much is, because most people who know him only know him from this. I've never heard somebody tell me about a great wrestling match and have Grizzly Smith's name in the conversation.
Even though he was top booked always.
And this is somebody who's watched a fuck ton of wrestling in his life. And I have never heard of a classic match with Grizzly Smith. I've heard classic matches with people I've never even heard of. But Grizzly Smith, this man's name never came up in any wrestling conversation. So as far as the greats, he ain't in the conversation. And if he was, he's been scraped from the record books pretty much. So, and I agree wholeheartedly with it. And I pick now, Robin says the whole thing started with her when she was 8 or 9 years old. A month before, and here's how crazy this shit got. A month before he started molesting her, he would manipulate her by ignoring her and not wanting to be in the same room as her. It fucked with her head because she was wondering why her daddy doesn't want her. Then, one day, while the mother was out of the house, he calls Robin into her back office and says, "You know Daddy loves you." And that starts the first of many moments that this happened. And she said it stripped her of all the things that make her a child. It lasted until she was 14, because then she told her mom and they left. And she also, at one point, threatened to shoot her dad with his own gun if he ever did it again.
Yeah, I want to say this. There's situations in my family where certain sisters of mine were molested by a certain person. And the court case about this was after I turned 21, which in the United States is when you're legally allowed to buy a handgun. That's why I didn't go to the court case.
Shit.
Because I would have put a bullet in him.
I wouldn't have blamed you.
So I'm just going to say this right now. I told him before he started this, I had very, very strong opinions before this episode. I mean, when I listened to this episode, I didn't realize what I was getting myself into. Like I said, I heard Smith and thought, oh, Davey boy.
Yeah. And I told everybody here, say what you want on this. I'm letting everybody...
Mr. Smith is a sick piece of shit. Look what happened.
I mean...
Sam Houston, alcoholic. Jake the Snake, look what happened to him. Near death.
Cocaine.
AP.
Cocaine, crack, alcohol, everything.
No one noticed that, gentlemen? Back in the 80s, wrestlers really, really liked their fucking yayo.
Yeah, they said it was the 80s. Everybody did. Some people did cocaine. They did it having fun, not really getting addicted. Some people just went over the top. Like, one of the things Jake used to say about cocaine was, when he first started doing it, it was fun.
It was fun.
Like, he enjoyed it. It was not a big deal. It was when he got to the point that he needed it just to get up in the morning, that's when it became a problem. That's when he turned that corner to it becoming an addiction, was when he needed it. But in the beginning, it wasn't bad in the beginning. It got bad later.
And he was using it to not feel. And that's the issue.
Exactly.
When they said Darkside of the Ring, it doesn't get much darker than this.
This is the darkest episode. Hands down. This is the darkest episode. All the episodes we've done, this is the darkest. Yeah. So, and maybe these guys can give me a different perspective so I don't get as pissed, but I'm going to be honest, this part right here kind of sent me over the edge a little bit. Again, I could have phrased this wrong. I thought I heard this correctly, so if I'm wrong, please correct me so I don't... But I hear Robin say this, and I quote, "Robin doesn't believe that her mom molested Jake. And if she did, Grizzly probably manipulated her to do it." Was I the only one that wanted to strangle Rockin' Robin the second I heard that?
You have to realize, in this particular situation, her mom is the only person not treating her individually bad.
Okay.
As a kid, and she was a kid when this would have happened to Jake, she's seeing the one good figure in her life not as the only savior to her. she's not going to see the possible negatives. She doesn't, so it's hard for her to believe it because she got so much else that was already wrong in her life. It is a psychological thing.
Okay. Because when I first heard that, my head spun 360. I'm like, first of all, now again, you make a valid point, but I'm just saying where my headset was. First of all, I'm listening to this thinking, okay, you're getting molested by your dad, who Jake is living with. It's like you believe that he's doing this to you. Meanwhile, your mom apparently is doing this to Jake, and you can't believe it when it's literally happening to you. That was my first process. And second of all, it drove me nuts because I'm going to be honest. I had a flashback when I saw this, and I'll tell you what I mean. Now, I've never been molested, but when and I know this is a weird, fucked up, stupid segue, but it's in the story, so I know I'm going to get a chuckle. But when I was in the Boy Scouts, please don't laugh. See, I knew this was going to fucking happen, okay?
Did you forget to make the cookies right?
That was the Girl Scouts, you idiot. First of all, Boy Scouts sell popcorn. Get it right. So anyway.
Did you forget to make the popcorn right?
Look. Girl Scouts make cookies. Boy Scouts eat brownies.
Yes, we do.
Yes. No. Get letters.
Oh, that actually reminds me of a funny joke. I gotta tell this real quick. My grandma, God rest her, she used to do this. She said when she was in the Girl Scouts, when she was a young child, her mom tried to talk her into going into the Girl Scouts, but my grandmother got kicked out because when she did the Girl Scout oath, she changed the terms, and she stood in front of the Scoutmasters and said, "This is my grandmother. You guys, if you've met her, because she lived here." And I quote, this is what she said. She went, "On my honor, I will do my best to help the Boy Scouts get undressed." And they kicked her out of the room. That's to this day one of the funniest things my grandmother ever said.
I wish I could hug this woman.
Oh my God. That was the best joke ever. But anyway, when I was in the Boy Scouts, and this is serious, they were trying to do this thing where they had this video they were showing us because we were kids. They wanted to teach us about stranger dangers and things like that and molestation. So they had this video called "It Happened to Me." I don't know if this is a video that still goes around. I ended up seeing it a second time in school, but they show this to basically show you signs to read when someone's possibly going to molest you, and if you do get molested, go get help, go do this. So you're watching like reenactments. Like there's a person that's telling a real story, but then they have like the reenactment with like the adults and the kids and everything else. So obviously these are actors,
right?
But they're showing it to kind of show you how inappropriate things can be. I brought a woman in to show this, which I thought was weird for the Boy Scouts, but anyway, she's showing us this tape because apparently she goes around showing people this tape. It's like an awareness kind of thing. So she's showing this tape. Every scene that I'm seeing is one of two things are happening. It's either a grown man molesting a little girl or manipulating a little girl, or it's a grown man molesting a little boy. We saw more, but the video had more of the little boy situation than the little girl situation. We were in the Boy Scouts. So I'm watching this. Everybody's watching this video. So of course, once the video's over, they ask the classic thing that they always do. Does anyone have any questions? My hand goes up.
Oh no. What did you do?
And they looked and they said, "Do you have a question?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I do." And I said, come on, I'm a kid and I'm saying this shit. I looked at her and I went, am I supposed to believe that only grown men are capable of doing this? Has there ever been a scenario where a grown woman has done this to a little boy? And the room went silent. Now, I will give this woman the credit where it's due. She gave me an honest answer. She said, "Yes, that does happen." And she started teaching that. But I said, "I noticed your video doesn't show that." Mm-hmm. Long story short, a year later, they had another awareness thing. I see a video. There was at least one scene with a little girl, with a grown woman babysitter molesting a little boy, and him telling the story. Now, I'm not going to say that I had anything to do with that, but I did notice a connection after that. But that bothered the shit out of me.
It's very possible that you weren't the only person to ask this question, and she finally brought it up to somebody.
Yeah. Because here's the thing. I'm not saying that grown men aren't molesters. Clearly they are. And we're seeing one right here. But I hate the fact that people try to pretend that a grown female adult is not capable of this shit. And it bothers me so much. Like, you're so worried about the guy creeping around. Like, and that's why it's like, it's crazy. Like, they act like only grown adults can do this. So when Robin said that, for some reason, it just took me back. And I found myself, like, screaming I started losing sympathy for Rockin' Robin. Because I just got so fucking mad in that moment. But again, what you just said, I didn't take that into consideration. And that is a valid point. But when Robin was 15, Joe Lynn paid her a visit to see if she went through what she went through. Not long after that, Joe Lynn was kidnapped. Richard punched a hole in a wall because he was angry and they were close. So Richard and Joe Lynn were very close with one another. Despite all the dysfunctions going on everywhere else, they were very close. So Richard was very angry about this. And we find out Carl Gaze, a.k.a. Buzz, his nickname was Buzz, was the chief of police in Tatum, Texas, where they all lived. Joe Lynn was kidnapped at her trailer park home. Her baby was found in the crib unharmed. Faye Lynn Rogers, who was the ex-wife of Joe Lynn's current husband, is the one who kidnapped her. She confessed to kidnapping. But she claims Joe escaped shortly afterwards. They had search parties on foot, helicopters, horses, motorcycles. They even talked to a psychic. And she claimed she got messages from Joe. And they never recovered the body, so Faye only gets charged with kidnapping.
Bullshit.
I mean, well, you say bullshit, but part of it is innocent until proven guilty. No body, no crime. I mean, you can't prove murder if there's no body.
Exactly.
There wasn't enough. It's like, unless you find enough blood that someone legitimately could not have survived it, you cannot prove that the person was killed.
Yeah. And Jake said the only time his father missed a wrestling match in his whole career was to go to that trial. His father was there and apparently very emotional. Like, he actually wanted to strangle somebody. But Jake didn't go because he was medicating, which is wrestling terminology for he was on drugs. He was basically drugged up and on the shit, and that's why he didn't go, because he was using the drugs to cope with it. The evidence was overwhelming, but without a body or witnesses, they could only convict her on the kidnapping, and she served only 7 years in jail. Yeah.
That sucks.
And like I said, Grizzly had piano wire and 2 pieces of wood and wanted to strangle her to death. They had police all over Faye to protect her because of how big Grizzly was. So they knew if Grizzly was coming after her, you would need practically the whole police department to take him down. Tasers and all. Grizzly's still a big motherfucker, and clearly wanted to kill somebody.
Here's, the thing about this that I'm seeing.
What?
First off, I want to make this very clear. I firmly believe Grizzly killed the bitch.
Okay.
Terminology was bad there. She was the victim. I should not be using the term bitch.
I get what you mean, but yeah, clarifying for the audience.
Yeah, that's just how I talk thing. It was not meant to disparage the person.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, I firmly believe that he killed her. Because first off, if it was a true kidnapping, from what I understand, too big. There's no way this girl would have been able to get her in the car.
Yeah.
And second, I think Grizzly killed her, and then the real reason he was going to strangle this girl is because he wanted to tie up loose ends.
Yeah, he wanted to make sure she wasn't going to blab.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, she never did. And they said that their theory was that her body was thrown in an incinerator because Faye worked at a place that had an incinerator. So they thought they cremated the body. And that's why they weren't able to get charged with anything. Now, some say Grizzly did it, like they said, out of fear of being exposed. And also because he was against, and this is like a big red flag right here. Probably the reddest flag there is he was against having the story on Unsolved Mysteries, where they actually solve shit like this. Like that would be the key thing. Why would you? I'm just saying. If God forbid this happened to any of us, I'm pretty sure if Unsolved Mysteries reaches out to you, you're taking the fucking opportunity. It's not because, oh, I want to be on TV. It's like, no, they actually solve these things.
Yeah, they would, because when you make something national like that, you get a lot more information than when it's kept private.
Exactly. Now, Jake said he put hatred into the character to cope with everything, his Jake the Snake character. The snake was used as a distraction, so people would look at the snake instead of him. Like, don't look at me, look at the snake in the bag. You know? Jake's success motivates Robin to pursue a career in wrestling. She goes to North Carolina to train with Nelson Royal. And he trained her like one of the guys.
Oh, yeah.
So she wrestled like one of the boys. Because back then...
That's what's wrong with most of 90s wrestling.
Exactly.
And that's also why women's wrestling is getting better. Don't get me wrong, I do miss the bra and panties matches. I'm a guy.
Exactly!
Look, I'm not saying it should be an every match thing, but when you build the story right and you make it about embarrassing one or the other, that's a way to do it.
Exactly.
That was the big problem with the bra and panties match in the 90s, was it was like every other fucking match.
Exactly. Some of them had a story behind it, some of them were just, let's just take their clothes off. The ones that had a story behind it are the ones you remember the most. That's key. So, but she trains with like one of the guys, and she wanted the girls' matches to be just as exciting as the guys. And once she completes her training, she uses her father's connections to show off her skills at a WWE TV taping and catches the attention of Vince McMahon. They put her in a dark match with Sensational Sherry. Vince was impressed by her skills and that she punches like a guy. Like, that was the thing she noticed. When she throws a working punch, it's like a guy. And he brings her on board. And apparently in 1988, they were all working for the WWE in some capacity. From Grizzly to Sam to Robin to Jake. All of them are in here. And again, the fans still didn't know they were related. They're in WWE, they're on the biggest stage there is, and you still didn't know. That's the beauty of no internet. You can still keep that fucking secret.
Mm-hmm.
If the internet was around, we'd have found out eventually. Because you always do. Like, trust me, the internet, how do you think we know most of the relationships in the business that we know? Internet. Because they don't really mention much of them on TV. But anyway, so they're all working for WWE at the time. At the time, the best compliment you could get was, you're a good hand and you're a great worker. And you hear that term a lot. And sometimes, some people use it as a way to degrade wrestlers nowadays. Like heels do that, saying, you know, you're not really on my level, but you're a good hand. Like, they try to do that to degrade you. But back then in the 80s, that was a compliment. Because it meant that you could perform at a high level and you could do it without hurting your opponent.
Well, yeah, here's the thing is, there's a difference between saying, here's the thing is, in any physical industry, I work in power. Someone says, hey, you're a good hand, that's a great fucking compliment. If your boss, if your general foreman walks up to you, because I've got a foreman, which is my direct boss, and a general foreman who is my foreman's boss, right? It's like your manager and general manager, right?
Yes.
So if your general manager walks up to you, or your general foreman walks up to you and says, hey, your foreman says you're a good hand. First off, my foreman thought enough of me to tell the big boss that I'm good. But that's a good term. That's not even just a wrestling thing. Any physical labor, any trade like that, that's a very common common terminology.
Yeah. But most people forget that in the 80s it was a compliment, because today heels use it as a way to kind of tell people, yeah, you're good, but you're not on my level.
Yeah, of course.
And you're a good hand, but you know, you're never going to be
where I'm at.
Yeah.
Right? You're here to make me look good.
Exactly. Yeah, and believe it or not, there are literally wrestlers on a roster that literally look at you and go, you're just here to make me look good. And and most wrestlers hate hearing that from other people. Now, what held Stan Houston back was how painfully thin he was, especially when he was in other territories where they had like bigger guys. So as good of a wrestler as Sam was, he didn't have the look. And you know, today wrestlers look like paper mache, but back then you couldn't look like that. You necessarily have to be jacked to the masses, but you had to have some muscle on you.
Yeah.
You had to look good on some level.
You had to be big enough that it was believable.
Exactly. To where if you hit somebody, you believe they could punch. Like, you're looking at Sam, it's like the difference between, and I use this terminology all the time, Brock Lesnar, Daniel Bryan. You look at Brock Lesnar, you know you don't want to fuck with him. You see Daniel Bryan, you're not scared of him until you actually fight him and he whoops your ass. Then you realize I didn't want to fuck with him.
Well, here's the thing: is Daniel Bryan's got the physique.
Oh, he does. I'm just saying, it's his height and size.
You don't look at Daniel Bryan and think vegan. Even though he was in some of the best shape of his life when he was.
Yeah. So the frustration drove him to drinking. And that's where it started doing. And he would drink 32 Crown and Cokes in a day, according to Baby Doll. And Baby Doll said she thought she could love him enough to cure the addiction, and she was wrong. And that's why she stayed with him through all of it. She thought, if I just continue to be supportive and I love him enough, he'll know that I care about him and he'll get past this. But apparently, Sam was so far gone with the addiction, that wasn't going to work. And that's got to be frustrating for both of them, because Baby Doll's heartbroken, but she realizes that it is and it isn't Sam's fault at the same time. It's like half his blame and half not. I can only imagine that shit. And then Sam had the all-time Texas state record for most DUI offenses.
But look, I know everything's supposed to be bigger in Texas. Not your DUI record.
No. You don't want that. But because his dad was such a big name, it kept him out of jail for years. So literally, Sam was going on trial, and Grizzly was working some kind of magic, and Sam would just get probation and walk away. And during that time, he never spent more than a day or two in jail. Max. He usually got fines or community service. And one time he washed 7 fire trucks that would be ready for a parade. Like, that was, he said when he did the community service, he worked his ass off. So he wasn't like lazy about it. And eventually, MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, got a hold of his record, and they got him locked up. And he was only in jail for like a short period of time before he decided to hang himself. And the soles of his feet were bruised for weeks when he failed to do so. Apparently, like the knot wouldn't stay, and he fucking fell, and his feet were bruised for like weeks because he landed really hard on the concrete. I forget how long he was going to be in jail for, but I can only imagine how insane it was to want to end it like that.
Do that now. They put you in the chair.
Well, yeah. Well, they find ways to make sure you don't do that.
Dude, I've seen it before when I was in county jail. This guy was stupid and hollering, he's going to kill himself. They put you in the chair, and I walked by there, he just, I'm like, thank God I'm a normal person in here.
Yeah, they will lock you up. They'll either tie you to they'll either strap you to a bed or strap you to a chair. They will put you somewhere where you cannot hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Do you think those taser guns don't work? I don't think again.
Oh, they definitely do. I mean, I've never been hit with one, but I know that they do. One day, Robin gets a surprise visit from her father, who has a 9-year-old girl with her and says, "Can you make her a daiquiri?" She says no. He eventually went to sleep. Robin stayed up all night with the girl, and when Grizzly left, he wouldn't let the girl go with her.
At least one of the kids realized what was going on and tried to do something. And that's the big thing. Is like I'm not attacking anybody in this sense. They were victims, but she had enough sense to say this has to stop. Yeah, and that's hard to do when you are a victim of something like that.
Well, she knew that it was too late for her. But I'm not gonna let what happened to me happen to this girl.
Right.
Because she was been down that road. But it just imagine how fucked up that is. Like Robin, because Robin's still trying to process what the fuck is going on. Because she answers the door, because it's not like they had cell phones back then. So they say, "Hey, honey, I'm coming over." Like, no. She opens the door, and the guy who molested her is standing on the other side of the fucking door, and just walks in with a potential victim, and is basically saying, "Hey, can you make her a daiquiri?" It's like, motherfucker, what? Like, that's a total mind fuck. Just acting like not like that didn't just happen.
Well, and the thing about that is, perpetrators of stuff like this, they get into your head so badly that you don't fight against them. It's you either believe it's your fault or you believe that it's okay. Or I had a cousin who I don't know if it was her I think it was her biological father. I want to say it was her biological father. I could be mistaken. But basically, he had full custody of her, or it might have been joint custody, main custody, and then her, the mom had less or something like that. But the father had majority rule, and raised her basically not understanding that it was not okay for a father to show that kind of a loving relationship with the daughter. I'm not naming any names for obvious reasons.
That's fine.
Right. But that she was raised in a way that she didn't understand that, and and so that's what it comes down to, though, is it's usually a slow build to make it go where it goes, and they don't understand what's going on.
Yeah. And then, of course, we cut to back to Jake Roberts, who spirals out of control with drugs and alcohol. Most of us know this story. His addictions trumped the addictions of all the other wrestlers in the business. Like, out of any wrestler that's ever had a drug problem, that's ever dealt with alcohol, that has ever been on the other side, literally no one has dealt with it or had a bigger struggle with it than Jake Roberts. Hands down, when people think of wrestlers on drugs, they think Jake the Snake. Hands down. Or at least they used to. They said that he was the guy that everyone thought was going to die. Like, when there would be a wrestling death. And here's the thing, Jake was so depressed while he was on drugs and alcohol, and like hated himself so much, that whenever he would see news of a wrestler dying, his first thought would be, why not me? That's literally what he's thinking. He's yelling at God, why are you taking them and I'm still here? I actually want to go. Like, that would be his frustration. Like, he would get mad when he would see another wrestling death back then. And Jim Cornette makes the joke that Jake Roberts was basically the Keith Richards of pro wrestling. That he could do all these drugs and was still standing, like Keith Richards. And Jake said, the most important thing in my life for 20 years was cocaine. More important than sex, money, his children, wives, his mother, everything. And he said, being in the limelight gets you things that you think you want or you need. When you do drugs, your idea of a good time changes, brother. You get kind of freaky. First it's one girl, then two girls, then three girls doing this with a rabbit and a dog, and you're having fun sitting in the back of a chair with a lamp on my head.
You need drugs to want to do some weird stuff like that? What are they putting in my food?
Okay. At some point later on, do I want to know about the rabbit and the dog? Do I want to know?
Well, it hadn't gone that far, but I mean, from the 1 to 2 to
3, yeah.
To handcuffs and whips and.
Yeah, exactly. I think it just got, it escalated, and then the lowest moment in Jake's career was the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view. Jake showed up in no condition to perform, which was the 747,000th time he did this. He grabs a girl's hands in the crowd and rubs them on his chest. Now, most guys had bad matches because they were over the hill and past their prime. Jake was fucked up. That's why he had a bad match. He pulled out the snake and put it near his crotch to pretend it was his dick, which is what he used to do. Now, some say that was his low point. I found a different one. And if you watch the Resurrection of Jake the Snake Roberts, the documentary, they show you the biggest low point that he had, where he showed up at an indie show and he is drunk off his ass. He had these little, like, one of those, like, vodka bottles that are like that big. There's like a stack of them, like a haystack size of them in the locker room. He just chugged all of them. And he's out there slurring. He's like leaning over. He can't even fucking wrestle. Like, at one point, this guy throws him into the corner. He's coming out of the corner. He drops to one knee. He clearly can't fucking do shit. The guy eventually turns him around, forces him down. They cover him 1, 2, 3. And the guy...
You mean like the Jeff Hardy Sting bit?
Yeah, only different. Like Sting did a scorpion death drop, kind of hooked both the legs.
He still forced him to hold him down. You
Yes.
could tell Jeff was trying to kick out.
Exactly. This guy did like a amateur wrestling roll like takedown where like you got like a half Nelson and you're pressing down chest on chest, trying to pin a guy. Like he did it like amateur wrestling style, like you would in high school wrestling.
Right.
Then he gets the fuck out of the ring because that's hard to kick out of because your shoulder blades are flat in a move like that, especially if you got a guy who knows how to do a move like that right. It's hard to kick out of that because the guy's acting.
And like it was mentioned earlier, Jake was no amateur wrestler.
Exactly. So bridging was not his thing. Because usually when you're pinned like that, that's the only way you're getting up. Is if you know how to bridge your body and your neck and you can like force yourself over, that's the only way you're kicking out of that. If it's on tight enough. Otherwise you can find a way to roll through. But so the guy quickly gets out of the ring and he cuts this promo talking about all the legends he had been in the ring with, and he basically yells at him and goes, "You're a piece of shit, Snake! You gypped these people! Fuck you!" And then drops the mic, storms to the back.
He basically shot on him.
And then Jake, everybody's booing Jake, and Jake, instead of using a snake to pretend it was his dick, he actually showed his fucking dick. They had to censor it on TMZ, and that was the low point for him. Now in the beginning of the documentary, they show that clip before they cut to Jake on the journey from start to finish. But they show that low point in his career.
Yeah.
Because that was basically the final straw where eventually, years later, people reached out to DDP. Now, Jake says he's a junkie and a liar and a thief. And there's a lot of self-hate involved in admitting that. Jake hated himself so much, he had all the mirrors in his house taken down, and the ones he couldn't take down, he broke because he couldn't bear to look at himself. And I remember him telling that story. That was like where his mindset was when he was going through all the drugs and everything. Like, I've heard of stories about people hating themselves, but never to this level. Like, it was, like, you really hear Jake's story. That, to me, is what makes Jake an inspiration to people. Is the fact that he went through all of this and somehow managed to quit it all. To, like, walk away from it.
10 years.
Sober. He started in 2012.
He's been 10 years. He's been before 2012.
Well, yeah, 2011 was when he kind of stopped and was doing the workout, but like 2012 was when he was really picking up.
Yeah, that's when his life started getting back on track.
Yeah. So within years of the WWE phasing out their women's division, Robin ends her career and eventually hits her own rock bottom with alcohol abuse. She says the drinking wasn't because her career was over. She said it was to numb the pain from being molested. She eventually motivated herself to get clean by saying her dad ruined her childhood, and she'll be damned if she'll let him ruin the rest of her life.
That's a hard point to come to. It's a big part of, like I said earlier, when I was my dad was causing a lot of anger issues in my youth and into my in my early adult years. And like I said, I still get worked up. Everybody gets worked up.
Of course.
Anybody who claims they're never angry is lying through their goddamn teeth. But having true rages like I used to go into, and learning to go through that, it's another concept. It's like, look, my dad fucked me up. I had to learn to get past it, and she finally got past it.
Yeah.
That's a really fucking hard thing to do.
Yeah. It was. I will say that the only thing that I thought was interesting was, and again, I'm not trying to say anything bad. This is just what I'm thinking. When she said that she started drinking to numb the pain from being molested. At this point, she's been like wrestling. She's been on top of the world. She's been the women's champion. If she needed to numb that pain, why did she start so late with it? Why didn't it start earlier?
She was already drinking while she was wrestling. It just came to a larger fruition afterwards. She was using wrestling as an outlet for that pain.
Okay, so when she no longer had the outlet, it went deeper.
the alcohol became worse.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, it's a common theme. When people get off of drugs, they need something else to fill their life.
So now, Grizzly died at the age of 77.
Good fucking riddance.
Yes. Richard became his caretaker until the end. Sam was in prison at the time, so he didn't get to say goodbye. They also showed footage of Beyond the Mat with Jake and his dad cleaning the backyard. And his dad says he loves him in the video. Now, whether or not that got back to Jake, I don't know. But he tries to say it. Now, Jake said he thought his death would make the trauma easier to forget, but he was wrong.
You never forget something like that. Eventually, you can learn to let it go, but it's not going to go away. And he's gotten off the drugs, but living without the drugs is the hard part.
Yeah, and the thing is that at the end of the day, Jake, I remember Jake said this in, again, this is on Joe Rogan's podcast, but I gotta reference it. He said that the hardest thing about it when you get dealing with all that trauma is that when you do meet the people that are talking to you about it, like when they say get help, find somebody to talk to, the key thing they always want to do is that they want you to remember what happened. He goes, I don't want to remember it. Nobody in that situation wants to remember this. I want to fucking forget it. Like that, and that was his big thing. That's why he thought it'd be easier. He could, because Jake, his whole life, that's why he medicated, that's why he did everything. He wanted to forget about it. But people who wanted to talk to him about it wanted him to remember it. And he said that was why he dove deep into addiction and everything. And then also, he would tell stories about how he would be at autograph signings and a kid would come up and he could just look at the kid and tell something's wrong. Like he could see the vibe, like, oh crap, this guy's going through it. And he would sometimes read like if a guy's there with like whatever adult, a father, uncle, whatever, he could look and somehow he could just tell this is happening. Whether or not it's him, he could tell from the vibe or everything, but like he could notice it.
Something's wrong with the kid.
Something's wrong with that kid. And he said the most fucked up part about it is when, like, let's say you call, like, there's a number we can call. We'll talk about that at the end of in a minute. But usually, if you call and report it, and they go down there and they take that statement, here's the fucked up part: if they don't find enough sufficient evidence, you're going back home.
And there's nothing
with them.
Yeah, and there's nothing they can do about it.
And it's the thing, like, you're going back with them. And it's like, and Jake's like, are you fucking crazy? Do you realize what's gonna happen to me when I go back there? Because now I almost turned this motherfucker in. I'm fucked 6 ways from Sunday now. And he talked about how fucked up it was back then. Now, whether or not that's changed, I don't know. Usually in these situations now, in some cases, they let the kid go back with the parent. Other times, they hold on to the kid till there's a big investigation.
There's a lot of, it depends on specifically what the kid said. And there's usually if the kid, generally something like that, the kid is designated a guardian. And for something like this with sexual abuse, if the parent is the abuser or something like that, then they would have to be kept separate from them. In this particular kind of case, if the kid is the accuser, then they're kept separate more often.
Yeah.
But generally, the kid's not usually the accuser because they either don't realize that something is wrong, or they think that they did something wrong and that they're at fault.
Exactly.
So usually the kid is not the accuser, and they have to go off the word of other people. And if the kid doesn't back what's going on, and there's not enough evidence to support it, there's not much they can do about it.
Exactly. And then of course Jake makes it clear that he said his dad never apologized to them. He did. And this is the interesting thing they talk about, is that he honestly never thought he did anything wrong. That was Grizzly's mindset. Like, he doesn't realize what he did. He thought that his behavior was just, I just did what I did.
Everybody does this.
Yeah, he's thinking this is normal. Like, no, dude, it ain't normal. These kids are fucked up because of it. And Sam and Robin said they eventually did talk about it a few years ago. Sam idolized his dad and said probably would have sided, and they said they probably would have sided with his dad at the time if they had told him. So, because like they said, Sam thought the world of Grizzly. So I think Sam would have done what Robin did when he found out what her mom was doing.
Yeah.
So Sam would have been totally in the same boat. So I guess Robin can't fault him for that, especially since she was going to do the same damn thing.
Right.
So that was an interesting thing. And then they said Robin blames no one for them not being close when they were younger, because they were all messed up in that scenario. So it's not any of the siblings' fault. Richard considers himself the lucky one in the group. He said his dad never forgave him for putting him up for adoption, and he never asked for it. With Grizzly's death, the children finally feel safe enough to open up about their experiences from childhood, but their estrangement still exists today. Now, normally, and I say normally because this is the exception to the rule, but I've said in the past, normally when someone waits till someone's dead to talk shit, I usually see that as like, that makes the story suspect to me, or that they're trying to bash somebody and take the coward's way out. I don't apply that to this. This.
If something like this is, they're legitimately scared of the person.
Exactly.
They are controlled by that person.
Yeah.
They don't have the freedom to do what they need to tell them, and that's a lot to take in.
Exactly. So this is different from the Moolah video I did a while back. This is a different scenario, and I'm applying a different form of logic to this. So, and they said the estrangement still exists today. Jake said he would love to have a relationship with Robin. Sam wishes they could be closer. Richard also wants to be closer. And Robin said she would like the same thing. So, here's the thing that I found the most interesting with this. Was all four of them, now obviously this is taped and interviewed in advance, edited, and then aired on television. So even though you're seeing this now, it was taped a long time ago.
Right.
If all four of them are saying, while they're being interviewed, that they want a relationship, why couldn't Darkside of the Ring do for them what they did for David Benoit and Nancy's sister? They brought them together at and it doesn't have to be in an AEW show, but that's where it happened to be there, because
Right.
Jericho was narrating, and they put them in the same room and allowed them to have some type of relationship. Why couldn't they just do that? You could have had all four of them sitting together towards the end.
This is a lot harder.
Okay.
This is a lot more complicated. This is something that started when they were young and got worse and progressively worse throughout their lives. It's completely changed who they are. It is a big deal, and putting these them together, they all understand how awkward it's going to be. They want things to be better, but it's going to take a lot more than putting them in a room together to make it better.
Okay.
This is a different situation.
Yeah. And then Robin says she wants to inspire people who are victims to get help. And Jake says, run and get help if you're in that scenario. And he says he's still mad at times, but he doesn't have to do drugs anymore. And as we mentioned before, he's been clean and sober for 10 years. And they show Jake basically at Daly's place towards the end, because as we know, that's what Jake's doing today. He's managing Lance Archer. He's part of AEW. You know,
They need to put him with someone else, because Lance Archer's starting to do his own thing.
Exactly. But that's another story for another podcast. But Jake is able to, get back in the business, get back in everything. Not only that, he got to make an appearance at a Raw Legends show and got inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, which is something that no one thought would ever happen because of his life and his career and everything. And he got on there. In fact, that was the end of his documentary. Was they put that in there, the Hall of Fame induction. They got permission from WWE to air parts of it. And the fact that DDP was the one to induct him, because he got him back on that track. And even Scott Hall got inducted that same year. It was just having that story. So Jake became the focal point, not just because he was the star of the siblings, but also because his addiction was the worst out of all of them. Because like I said, no one thought he would ever get clean. Everyone wrote him off as a lost cause. When he came out the other side, that's an inspiration to anybody on drugs, wrestler or not. That's what made the documentary great. That's what made the whole thing great. The fact that there are people who've never watched wrestling a day in their lives, who are addicts, saw this documentary, and it changed their lives. That is the most amazing thing to see everything Jake went through, and he came out the other side. It is amazing, and
it's never too late to come out the other side.
it's never too late to come out the other side.
Come out the other side.
Exactly, and they end the show with this disclaimer, and not really a disclaimer, but a message, and I'll put it on here too, and I may put like a little credit thing at the end, just to be sure, but it says, if you or someone you know has been affected by sexual violence, RAIN's National Sexual Assault Hotline offers free, confidential, 24/7 support at 1-800-656-4673 and via online chat at online.rainn.org. So that's where you can go to get this. And at the risk of being controversial, I'm just going to say one thing right now. If you're going to use this for somebody that's actually going through this and isn't going to use it to hurt somebody else.
Well, this right here, in a lot of ways, this is online support. This is just as much about counseling as it is about accusing.
Okay.
This is not necessarily something that I mean, yeah, it is about getting help and getting yourself out, but it's also about counseling if after the fact. There's a lot to this.
Okay.
But yes. Here's the thing: is if you have worries about something, still make the call.
Yes.
Here's the thing: even if you're not sure, make sure. It's like, look, things are weird. I don't want to make but I think this needs to be checked out. And sometimes it might just be a weird feeling, and sometimes you might save a life.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that unless you actually feel like something's wrong, then use this. But don't use this as a tool to hurt somebody, because there are sickos out there that would do that. So I want to make that clear.
Unfortunately, that is a true thing as well.
Yes, and that's why I'm saying that. We at the Boochcast are saying use this to save a life that actually needs to be saved. And use it, in other words, use it responsibly. And unless anybody else has got something to add, I think we can wrap this video up. This, ladies and gentlemen, will conclude the Boochcast reviews Darkside of the Ring. As we said before, we told you this is going to be a crazy one. I do want to thank Desmond for being on the show, and also Dan, just on a personal note, for how open you've been on the show. Because, you know, you said this offended you. I had no idea how much. I knew some of these stories, but not a lot. But it means a lot that you were willing to open and share. Obviously, there was no pressure, but I do appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And Zach, obviously, thank you for being here as well. And make sure you guys tune in next week. We got a not as crazy episode next week. The next episode we got is the career of the Dynamite Kid is next. So that'll be me, Desmond, and Elvis will be here. So Elvis will be returning to talk about the Dynamite Kid. So make sure you guys tune in for that one. Hopefully it'll be slightly more upbeat. But like I said, we got to do what we got to do. So make sure you guys are following the Boochcast. We are on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, and Google Podcast. Make sure you guys following. The links are in the description box below. Pick your favorite hosting site or follow us on all four. Also, like us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. The links are down in the description box, as well as our Twitch channel. That's down there as well. And of course, support the show. We have a special thing on Anchor. You go to anchor.fm/theboochcast/support and pick the tier that you want. You guys know the spiel by now. And of course, subscribe here on the YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. Ring that bell to be notified so you don't miss the next episode of the Boochcast Reviews Darkside of the Ring, as well as the other YouTube content that we have on here. And we will talk to you guys next time. Until then,
Pizza, baby!
Pineapple goes on the pizza.
I will kill you.